Hey guys, Mr.B here. So today I've got a 2015 Ford Fusion with the check engine light on. There's only one code for this vehicle, and that is the P0420 Catalyst System Efficiency Below Threshold code. That is typically a code for a vehicle that has a bad catalytic converter. Before I condemn that catalytic converter and replace it, there's a few steps I like to take to make sure that there's not any other problems. The first thing I like to do is look at the oxygen sensor reading post-cat. So the post-cat oxygen sensor should have a pretty steady, stable reading. As you can see, O2 bank 1 sensor 2, it's fluctuating quite a bit. What that tells me is that the catalytic converter is most likely not doing its job, because this reading is very similar to what you would expect out of a bank 1 sensor 1, which is pre-cat. Being that this is post-cat, you shouldn't see all these fluctuations. One thing I'm going to check for before I go ahead and replace that catalytic converter is any exhaust leaks, any air getting in. I have had vehicles in the past where air got in through a leak and caused the oxygen sensors to be skewed and caused that P0420 code to come up. So just to show you guys here, I'll go ahead and go back and pull codes. So that's our code there. P0420, Catalyst System Efficiency Below Threshold Bank 1. This vehicle has a 4-cylinder engine, so there's only one catalytic converter. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this, do a visual, and make sure there's not any exhaust leaks. If there isn't, then I'm going to go ahead and replace that catalytic converter. All right, so before I go any further, I want to be able to get access to the catalytic converter. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this metal panel right here. There's a Torx bit bolt right there and another one right there. I'm going to take those out, get this off, and gain better access to the catalytic converter. Catalytic converter is right down there. You can see the oxygen sensor going into it. And then it is covered up by these heat shields. And I'm going to go ahead and do some more tests on that. I'm going to make sure that there's no exhaust leaks. And I'm also going to use my heat gun to check to see if it's working properly. All right, so I did end up removing this felt cover as well. It just gave me better access to that catalytic converter. So now that the engine's running, I'm gonna go ahead and look up underneath. I'm gonna be careful not to burn myself on anything, but I'm gonna check for any exhaust leaks in or around the catalytic converter. This one's right up close to the manifold, so I don't feel any leaks. I don't hear any leaks. Before that oxygen sensor, the wires for the sensor look good. I don't see any issues with that. And we don't have a code for the oxygen sensor, so I'm going to let it warm up for a little bit, and then I'm going to test it with my heat gun. All right, so now that the vehicle's warmed up a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and take my heat gun. I'm going to point the laser just before the catalytic converter, and then I'm going to also check it just after the catalytic converter. If this catalytic converter is doing what it's supposed to do and filtering out the chemicals and the exhaust gases going out the tailpipe, the chemical reaction actually produces heat. So it should be warmer, about 50 degrees warmer or more on that end of the catalytic converter post-cat versus the inlet. So I'm going to go ahead and check that just to confirm that this catalytic converter is bad. So coming into the catalytic converter, we're at about 320 to 350. We'll test it right there. Yeah, so right there's the inlet. So we're about 320 at the inlet. Let's see what the outlet's at. So the outlet's only at 250, 260. So that catalytic converter is definitely bad. The temperature, like I said, should be actually more on the outlet than it is on the inlet, and we don't have that. So that tells us that catalytic converter is broken. might be in pieces on the inside. Even if it's not doing what it's supposed to do. There might be some exhaust gases getting around the honeycomb on the inside and then causing that P0420 code to pop up. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace that. On this vehicle, there is a connection back here to take loose, so you gotta get those bolts loose. There's a couple of hangers right here, so there's bolts for that to take that loose, and there's bolts there for that heat shield bracket. And this catalytic converter does have the manifold attached to it, so I'm gonna have to do some work up on top. So this is what the new catalytic converter looks like. We've got the catalytic converter right there. It's welded to the manifold. It's got the flex pipe that comes with it and that flange there. I am gonna have to swap over the oxygen sensors. It did come with a new set of gaskets, which is nice. And I'm gonna start by getting the heat shields off. So there's 2 bolts right up on top for the heat shield. There's also another bolt right there and another one on the other side. So I'm gonna get those 4 bolts out. I'm just gonna unplug the oxygen sensors and take those out with it as an assembly. Surprisingly, these 3 bolts came out no problem. Didn't even break off. That one down in there, attaching the heat shield on, I think will come loose, but the end of the bolts rounded off. So this is a good chance to show you guys how to use these round off sockets. They're very, very, very handy. They're good for bolts that are rounded off on the end. So you just stick it on the end of there. I might have to hit it with a hammer, and then it catches the bolt and you can twist it out. Putting it back in it doesn't quite work the same way, but taking it out, it works really good. There it is. So there's my heat shield. And then to do the rest of the job, at least up on top, I'm gonna have to take off those nuts for the manifold. Sensor, I still have to unplug this one right here. So there's that one. So I'm gonna work on getting those bolts loose. So I've already got like 3 of those nuts loose. They are on there pretty tight. They've been on there for a while, so they don't really want to come loose. So I do have my special handy dandy Snap-on Extendo 5000. This was a very expensive tool. I paid a lot for it, and I'm gonna go ahead and use it. Might as well get use out of my hard-earned money. So unfortunately the round off sockets didn't work on those nuts. This typically happens. If I had a torch, I would heat that up until it was red hot and see if it would come loose. But unfortunately my torch is empty right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut them off with my die grinder. And then I might have to use the air hammer to pound out the rest. All right, so now that I got these bolts cut, I gotta work on getting the studs out so I can replace them with bolts. I'll probably just use my air hammer for that. And then for the catalytic converter, I'm gonna try my best to sneak it out this way through the bottom. Doesn't really look like it's gonna come out from the top. If I remove this bracket right here, that'll give me the space that I need. 3 nuts there. Now that I got those 3 nuts loose, I was able to bend the bracket down a little bit. Didn't even have to take those other nuts loose. And this catalytic converter is slipping out of here. So I did find it helpful to take my die grinder and slice off the back of that bolt. And then I took my air hammer and pounded it out with the air hammer. So if you ever need to take off one of those exhaust hangers, this tool right here is actually really helpful. You just kind of use it to squeeze the hanger off of that metal bracket there. You can get these for fairly cheap, and a lot of people don't know about them. All right, so I got the new catalytic converter in. This one did come from Rock Auto, so it wasn't the name brand one. One thing I did notice is this bracket didn't line up once it was bolted to the cylinder head, and the holes didn't quite line up for the heat shield, but I was able to stick some bolts in there and put it all together. But the main reason why I want to film this is so I can show you guys the temp gun readings. So now that the new catalytic converter's in, we have an inlet temp of anywhere from 160 to it's hovering around 200, and the outlet temp is right around 300. So we've got an increase of about 100 degrees, which is exactly what you want out of a catalytic converter. That tells us that that catalytic converter is actually working. And now there's our bank 1 sensor 2 readings. And you can see that they're much more stable now than they were before. The graph is showing it fluctuate a little bit, but not a whole lot. It's right at that 0.86 range, not a whole lot of fluctuations. That's exactly what you want to see out of your post catalytic converter sensor. So that right there confirms that we did fix the problem, and that the new catalytic converter is going to prevent that check engine light from coming back up, and that the old one wasn't doing its job and it wasn't doing what it was supposed to, which is why the check engine light came on. So if you guys found this video helpful, please go ahead and like and subscribe.